Folks, if you're joining us here on the familiar Late Night Grin channel with Jaychele and I, you're used to us seeing us maybe rank some stuff, talk some free agents, all sorts of different stuff. That is not the case today. Hopefully, if you're watching this live, or the closest we can do it live, premiere mode, right? You've just come from watching the Wrestling with Whiteness project on Jaychele's channel, which is just wrapped like 15 minutes ago. If you have not done that, pause this, go and do that. This will be there waiting for you afterwards, right, Jaychele? Our intention here is to do like kind of a post show, put a bow on this experience for you. I've got a few questions about some of the things that watching it. But before we get into any of that, Jaychele, how are you this evening?
I'm good. I'm very excited about this talking running. It's literally my baby. I've been working on it since January, and it's very extensive. But I'm very excited.
Absolutely, and it's worth noting we are recording this a few days early, so if you're wondering why, maybe there's a major topic that will not be discussed here. It's not time for it. This is about this particular project, and you said you've been on it since January. When you first took, because I remember your announcement vividly that you were going to do this. When you first took that kind of plunge, like I'm going to do it, did you have any idea the scope it would actually take in? Because it grew very quickly. It felt like from the outside looking in.
Yeah. Originally it was just gonna be the interviews that I had recorded, which was
Yeah,
like the members of STP, Eli Isom, and Kenny King, I think.
yeah,
And that was all that it was gonna be. And so quickly everything changed. I kind of just broadened my expectations for myself too. I
mm-hmm.
feel like when I kind of came up with the idea, it was very limited in who I thought that I could get to be a part of it. And people were in different companies, and I was like, I haven't worked with these companies. I
Right.
don't know if they're interested in doing stuff with me, or if they'd even be interested in doing a project that could be considered even controversial. Um, so I was very excited to see how fast it grew, and it was extremely shocking how receptive the community was too. Because at the time, I maybe hit 2,000 followers the day
Right.
before or so. Like it wasn't. Not that my platform is much bigger now, but um,
Mm-hmm.
still, yeah.
Because that does when you're watching it, like obviously, because I'm way inside baseball here, right? So like I know from I can kind of tell which era of this time has taken place and stuff. And you mentioned the STP interviews, and you notice with them, and that part of this is intriguing to me in the way that this kind of took shape organically. Also, do you think the response from the talent is telling in its own way that there was like a willingness to let's do this thing? Because honestly, there's a lack of opportunity to get these kind of stories out there in this space. Because frankly, and you and I have joked about it before, but seriously, a lot of the folks these wrestlers talking to look like me, right, with a beard and
Yeah.
the white, and that's a joke that I make a lot, but it's the truth. Do you think the how willing people were to do it is telling in its own right? Because I honestly do.
Yeah, I a lot of people in it pick and choose their interviews due to how controversial their stances or characters may be. Darius Lockhart and Trisha Dora did not want to do the interview until they found out who I was
Right.
and what my project was, and I completely respect them for that. And that's exactly how it would be too. Um, and some people were just gun ho from the beginning because they knew me and they knew my work, my background, and stuff like that. But other people I kind of had to like prove myself a little bit more, like Shug D and Caprice Coleman took a little bit more time, but I was happy to work with them and kind of prove that this is the project I'm working on. This is why I'm doing this. All of those things that I had only the best intentions involved. Um, and when I was talking with SGP, the way that we planned to do it was to do a round table,
Mm-hmm.
like all of us on the screen at once. It didn't end up working out that way due to schedules and stuff like that. But even still, through that, I feel like you can still see the way that they were happy to talk about their
Yeah.
brothers and all of those things. So
You said there about this could be perceived. I think anyone that watches it will quickly realize that it really isn't, and it shouldn't be anyway. I should say. It could be perceived as controversial from the outside looking in, right? I'm sure you got some weird responses and stuff that made you roll your eyes. I see it. I understand that. Um, how pivotal was it for you? And there's one particular part I want to isolate in regards to this later on when we get into the documentary itself. But how key was it for you to quickly make it clear to the audience what your intentions were? Because there's regularly you appear solo to just kind of set the stage. That was important, right? It felt like it as a viewer anyway. What do you think?
yeah, so I was talking with Lily Alexandra, and we were trying to figure out ways to piece this thing together.
Yeah.
Um, And it was kind of pretty last minute that I actually recorded those things. I had no clue what I was going to say in them. And I was like, I have to write something down. I have to like, because even whenever I do regular interviews, I always do my best to protect the wrestler and protect their ideas and
Hmm.
everything that they're saying. Even if I'm not the one interviewing them and I'm just posting content online, I always like to defend the wrestlers. That's always how I have been and always how I will be. So I always value wrestlers who do a service for me, which is doing
Yeah.
an interview or being a part of my documentary, and I would like to do a service for them by doing what I can to promote them and make sure that they're um, not receiving any negative feedback or hate online, at least as much as I can control of it.
Mm.
But that was really important for me to make sure that I'm doing as much as I can to kind of put my stance on, okay, this is what we're going to do as a community. If you're going to watch this, you have to have an open mind. And if you're not, then I really don't even want you to watch it because it's going to um, sour you on a lot of these people if you're not willing to have open ears and
I
open
mean,
mind.
I don't want to, speak on your behalf, but I think you could stop it. You don't want them to watch it. I think this documentary, and I know why you didn't want, but like this documentary is in enough detail and enough depth that if the immediate reaction is pushback, like I think you're cool to watching other stuff. We don't really need you, right?
Yeah.
Like it's that way of looking at it. Let's talk about the concept here itself. So it's broken up into sections, or 5 sections. Was that something that came in the middle, or was that something in post that you was like, this is how we can best organize this? How did that part of the project come to be?
Well, at the beginning, the way I started was I was just writing these questions down. I had around maybe 20 questions or so that I wanted to ask, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, that's too many. I got to cut it down. We made it to about 12, 10 or 12 questions that I asked them. And I kind of looked at the theme of my questions to see if it reflected the themes that I was seeing within the
Yeah.
documentary. Originally, I called them themes, and I was like, that's so corny. I'm not calling them themes anymore. They're shared experiences because they share the same experiences. Um, so from there, once I heard about like the first 5 interviews or so, I knew what the themes were going to be, or the themes were going to be.
Yeah.
Um, but it originally kind of came from me looking at my questions and seeing how can I get answers out of these people that are honest without making them feel uncomfortable and feel like they're putting their career in danger.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously that's always a thing. I talked about blacklisting too in the documentary when I did a little bit of my talking head. So I wanted to make sure that I was doing what I could to I don't want to say toe the line because I feel like I went over the line a couple of times, but like gave it enough room for people to share how comfortable they were. If you weren't comfortable being completely open and honest about all of your experiences, then that's completely fine. But if you were ready to rock the boat a little bit, then I was just fine with that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a sense that your part in this is more bringing these voices together rather than making a clear attempt to shape a particular conclusion or narrative, right? Because I
Yeah.
mean, I think it goes without saying, and again, if you've watched the documentary, you'll know what I mean. There's a lot of different people at different points in their career, right? And some are, understandably, they're not rushing to say something that's wildly controversial, and good luck to them. And they're telling their truth, which is pivotal. But I think it was great that from your perspective, you just let that be rather than clipping it up and trying to make, it's their stories. You're just kind of bringing them together in like a fully formed piece here. So I want to quickly, I mentioned earlier about making sure people knew your intentions. I thought it was really smart to lead with the community element because and this is going to make it sound kind of lamer than it, but it's immediately kind of positive, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think it's important that this project. I fear that some people will look at it and in their very kind of pessimistic, cynical way will expect it to be one thing. There's a lot of positivity in this. Was it important to you to lead with that subject because there's some really uplifting stuff in there?
Yeah, one of the main things that I always focus on in the Black community is the positivity.
Yeah.
I feel like ever since I became a content creator, some of the people who have supported me the most are members of the Black communities, and specifically because they claimed me as one of their own off the bat.
Mhm.
And I knew if I, as a small content creator, had that experience, that Black wrestlers were sharing that same experience. Um, if you look at the baddie section now, I feel like that's a
Yeah.
representation of Black women sticking together and always finding each other in different situations. So I thought it was really important to reflect that. And even when you look at like Bianca, Sasha, Naomi, pre walkout.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously they were together, they were the Holy Trinity. And that's something we see in everyday life in wrestling. So it was important to highlight that in the documentary, but also to put that at the beginning because I had to give people a little appetizer. Be like, okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna start off slow and smooth and introduce you to what the Black community of wrestling is, but then we're gonna get real about it.
And it immediately makes them humans, right? Which we often struggle with wrestlers and entertainers in general. Like this, like they're real people with real
Yeah.
friends and real relationships. And one of the things that's really cool because you've got such a wonderful selection of talent is there's a lot of overlap, right? There'll be
Yeah.
guys and girls mentioned that then you cut to you interviewing them, and that's neat. It really brings the community element to the fore. Very early on, you say something that you and I actually talked about on and off air, but especially off air, about there may be some stuff said in this that may be a little uncomfortable to listen to for some folks. You and I have talked about kind of I get the sense a lot in the wrestling online community, not a lot, but there's like certainly a loud kind of group of folks that they don't want any reference or allusion to race. It immediately makes them feel like they're and we play around with it sometimes on our shows, but like
Oh, we did a full draft where I drafted only Black people until the last
right,
person.
and you know, and in all seriousness, in fear of pulling at the curtain here, but a lot of the time I will react to that in a way that kind of parodies what I
Yeah.
what I imagine someone out there is watching. And we have fun with it. Was it important to you to make that kind of statement though? You did it in a very kind of, you know, you pretty light with it in the sense of like it's okay if you're uncomfortable with it. You need just try and listen to us, like that's the way I read it. Is that how you intended it? Because I like that you put that in there.
Yeah. I'm always used to being in spaces where people are uncomfortable talking about race, so I kind of have
Right.
just became accustomed. Um, my background is in government and policy and stuff like that, and they don't want to hear nothing about it. Um, so sometimes we just got to use the numbers, and it is what it is when it comes to that. But the situation that I put those wrestlers in could have been very unsafe for their jobs, like I
Yeah.
said before. So
Yeah.
I wanted to do all that I can. If you're uncomfortable, then maybe skip a piece. If you're not ready to listen to this, then come back later. I mean, take it at your own pace. Understanding race and becoming an ally of Black folks and people of color in general is a journey.
Hmm.
Specifically, to become anti-racist, it is a journey and it's a process that you have to undergo and be conscious of.
Yeah.
Um, it's not just, oh, I gave money to this organization, now I'm anti-racist. That's not how it works. It's a process of unlearning all of the traits of white supremacy and oppression that are built into people who are not people of color or specifically Black
Hmm.
people since birth. Um, and even in wrestling, it's something that's just ingrained into your brain.
Yeah.
Regardless of who you see a white champion and they're squashing a Black person, people might think that that doesn't mean much, but it is showing
Mm.
obviously some implicit bias. And by supporting that, it's also showing some implicit bias as well. Um, but I thought that it was a very important piece to, like I said, set the stage, but also make people understand that this documentary is meant to meet you where you are. Wherever you are on your journey of understanding race and racial tensions and how race comes into play in different environments and different parts of society, um, this documentary will be here for whenever you are far enough on your
Hmm.
journey to listen to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we talk about how comfortable people are, I think it's important to note that if you are sitting there uncomfortable, you should maybe consider why that is on your on your end,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like,
I
because I
think
think,
I
good,
think when I was recording that talking head, I went on a tangent after that about like how you should discover that, and I was like, okay, let's not be too heavy with
yeah,
it here. So I cut part of it out. But
it particularly kind of caught my attention because you and I think it was last week, we actually used that word, right? And I said to you, I love when we frame it that way because my hope is that the people that are just in the middle of that process, and it is a process. It was wonderful the way you phrased that. I hope that hearing it talked about makes it better in that regard, right? Rather than it being this thing of like, please don't bring that up. Like
yeah,
it's dumb.
the
Yeah,
main piece of the journey is to listen to Black voices,
yeah,
and there's an opportunity right in front of you to listen to Black voices. I mean, I understand if you're not at that point in your life, everybody comes from different backgrounds and people have different amounts of white supremacy that they have to overcome,
Mm-hmm.
and different amounts of racism that they may have within them that they'll discover and things like that. But like I said, the documentary is meant to meet you where you are, and eventually, I feel like the goal is for a society to just give it a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderfully said. Okay, now a couple of things here as we get in the documentary itself. And again, folks, please do watch this for yourself. I've picked out a couple of things that I thought would be interesting questions and topics for Jaychele, but it's 2 hours plus. There are some very familiar faces, both from in wrestling and from our side of things, right, in the media side, which we'll get
Yeah.
to. Please do check it out. A couple of things. This really, I thought Caprice Coleman was a great interview throughout. And we both love Caprice, right? I think
Yeah.
everyone loves
His
Caprice.
voice is so magical.
He really is. But there was one particular tidbit that really was kind of the way he delivered it. You could easily have just missed it, but it was really a bummer. Where he talked about his friendship with Shelton, and he said that once upon a time, Shelton really would have had no choice but to kind of perceive him as competition when he was an extra at WWE and stuff. For me, I'll be totally transparent in saying that, like, kind of caught me way off guard because I don't think of Shelton as being a guy that was around way back when, but I guess that's the point, right? Was you surprised to hear that? And as a follow up question, do you think that's still a thing? Caprice he give the sense of optimism. We've moved on from that. What did you think of that particular part of his answer?
Okay. Um, Caprice was very optimistic in that interview
Yeah,
about looking forward. Um, I wasn't shocked to hear that because even conversations I've had with wrestlers now, they still experience it, and even
yeah,
content creators now, I experience it. Like I'm in
mm,
competition with other Black content creators, for different spots or whatever it may be. Um, but when I look now, if I could be honest, I feel like there's competition among factions, like Black factions, to
yeah.
be at the top of certain companies or for contracts and things like that. And you feel like there's certain quotas for contracts or shows or whatever it may be. Um, Certain promotions may only work with certain Black people, and you have to become one of those Black people that they work with. Um, and that's on the side of wrestling companies and wrestling media companies as well. There's select spots for Black people.
Mm,
And that's how it is in the regular world too. Like in government, in the workplace, there's quotas at colleges, there's like quotas. Um it's consistent throughout our society wherever you look. And um it may have changed slightly, but I feel like it's something that will always be there until we have diverse people backstage and
yeah.
people leading these companies who are mindful of their own experiences. Like there's always the kind of mentality that we've been forced into, which is like the crabs in the bucket bring each other down thing, which is very consistent in the Black community because there's not many opportunities. So we all fight for the same opportunities, and we end up just dragging each other down because of it.
Of course, it's worth noting. Caprice brought that up really in transition to the fact that he and Shelton are really good friends now, right? And it
Yes,
just
yes.
it did stand out to me. You mentioned quotas, and Willow really explores that and kind of gets into like the idea that you know it's an opportunity. She did say she's not, she doesn't really believe she's been an example of that necessarily, right?
Yeah.
Um, but she certainly explores the topic and obviously concludes, and I think we all co-sign her conclusion that we would like to think one day that wouldn't be the way this worked.
Mhm.
Obviously, I mean, it goes without saying. Um, that was the one interview that I thought particularly kind of locked in on that subject. What did you think of Willow's take on quotas and how it affects wrestling right now?
Yeah, th- I didn't want to imply that Willow was like
Right.
being like a member of any of the quotas or whatever it may be. Um, I just knew that they were existent, like from experiences I've heard outside and inside of Wrestling with Whiteness. Some of the
Mm.
conversations that weren't on air were obviously deeper conversations that were off the record and were more honest and truthful. Well, not to say that the ones that were on
Of
record
course, yeah.
weren't honest and
Yeah.
truthful. It was just you can say more things when
Mhm.
it's not going to be public. Um, but the when I had the conversation with Willow, um, it was right before she started to get picked up by AEW. So I feel like the way that we were able to take a look at that conversation now, um, it still aligns because she even talked about intergender wrestling
Yeah.
and the way that once we kind of begin to dismantle what we think gender is and what we think race and sexuality
Yeah.
are, we are able to have more people just wrestle each other. And that's what wrestling is meant to be. Wrestling is wrestling, as we said in the documentary. Um, but obviously, we have to adapt to our surroundings. And by having those quotas, it makes Black wrestlers and Black people in general become extremely adaptable. Like
Hmm.
myself, I've become a chameleon and I can try to fit into any situation because I know that there are such limited opportunities for Black folks that you need to be good at everything. And Willow's one of those people who is amazing at everything. She's amazing at merch, wrestling, promos. She can do it all. She has look, all that stuff. And a lot of the wrestlers in the documentary have all of that because you have to in order to succeed. You have to be 10 times better, if not 100 times better than your white counterparts to get that same attention because like I said, you're fighting for the same opportunities, you're trying to get the same eyes. It's always a cycle.
I have to ask, and I genuinely don't know the answer to this, but I feel it's the right question to ask. When Willow, you could actually see on camera her kind of considering her answer to, she said, "I don't believe I've been a quota, but maybe I'm just being naive, right?" Does that kind of doubt? We all know how great Willow is, so for her to watch her try and kind of consider this, does that doubt, while it has the positive effect of doing what you said in terms of becoming a chameleon and trying your best to tick every box and do what you can, does that weigh too in terms of like, do you ever have self doubt from your perspective in fear of being that? In kind of because you're so aware of that as a topic. Does that ever weigh on you? Or do you think it weighs on any of the wrestlers? I'm intrigued because that just, I saw watch Willow kind of think about it, and it's kind of heavy to consider.
Yeah, honestly, one of the things that I always like to think about whenever I go into a new place, so college, a workplace,
Yeah.
a media company, whatever it may be, I'm thinking about what does the current diversity look like? Are they using me to diversify their
Right.
current audience, staff, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
or are they bringing me in because they know I'm talented and they know that I can provide the service that they're looking for? And in my short career, do I feel like I've been a quota already? I mean, probably. They've
Yeah.
probably utilized the fact that I was a Black woman, a young Black woman who was able to keep up. And that is what that is. But I mean, if there are certain people who are okay with that, that's completely fine too. Make your money, do whatever makes you happy and provides you with happiness. People see quotas in different ways and quotas might be, oh, there at least there is an opportunity there, or it's not enough opportunity. Like obviously there's always different sides of that spectrum, or I have to do this because this is the only option that I have. I need to make money, I need to book the show even if I am a quota.
Mm.
Independent wrestling is hard and there's not always a lot of money on the table, so you take what you can get. um so even if you are a quota, I feel like sometimes there's not even enough opportunity outside of those quotas
Yeah.
to turn down something because you are being booked as somebody to fill a slot on a card or whatever, or to tick a box. Oh, we have a Black person, we have a Hispanic person,
Right.
we have a woman, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think Willow actually, the opportunity, that was the word she used too, right? In terms of like, there's certain things you notice, but an opportunity is an opportunity. I'm going to try my absolute best to nail it. So that's interesting. There was a wonderful moment when you were talking to Tasha Steeles, and anyone that watches our content knows you love Tasha Steeles, and rightly so. There was a wonderful moment when you were explaining in the role model section, you explained kind of your direct fandom. And you could see, and she didn't hide it, which is great, but you could see how much it made her happy, right?
Yeah.
In doing this process, do you think wrestlers fully get that part of this? Because sometimes I think it must be hard to fully grasp. Like, they mean a lot to people, right? Did that say that you kind of saw wrestlers? I felt like I saw Tasha piece that together while it was happening almost, which is really, really cool. Did you get that sense too when you did these interviews?
Oh yeah. I built so many great relationships through these interviews. Like I had only DM'd Tasha maybe 2 or 3 times before we did that
Mm-hmm.
interview. So we hadn't talked much. Swole, I had talked to more. Willow, I had not talked to at all.
Yeah.
And now Willow is one of my like closest wrestler friends that I can go to.
Mhm.
Um, and I obviously went to the Women's Wrestling Army show where I kind of did like a quick little interview with them.
Yeah.
But even with that, it was so great to finally meet them and to share like that same excitement that I had to like first have a conversation with them. Because I was also at a different point in my career when I did most of these interviews. It was like February-ish time. I was doing a lot more interviews than I'm doing now. I barely do interviews now, to be real.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a lot of time that I spent just like cultivating my connections and trying to engage with a bunch of different wrestlers and stuff like that. And to now have those connections once again like enhances that sense of community that I talked about at the beginning. But it also kind of allows for me to have new people that I can go to who can give me insight because they've been where I am and they've shared the same experiences I have.
I'm intrigued because I remember when you got kind of in this space, you very quickly, obviously, with Body Slam and stuff, and you were doing a lot of interviews. And as you just said, you do less now. And as you know, this platform certainly isn't going to be very often exploring interviews and stuff. But have you, how have you taken that part of this process? Because as you know, with me, I didn't do any interviews, or I did like two on the distraction. That's all. It's not my thing. You immediately did it and was obviously great at it. Have you enjoyed doing more stuff separate from that? Like, I mean, I remember doing the Body Slam show of you. When was that? Like October, the fantasy booking show. That
Hmm.
was a long time ago, right? And
Jesus
it
Christ.
feels like that then was like a creative venture. And now with this stuff, we do so much stuff like that. Have you enjoyed that process, and are you looking forward to kind of piecing it all together with the interviews alongside some of the other stuff we do now? Because it's been fun watching you develop that just on a personal note. Where are you at on that whole thing?
Um, well, I learned that I like in-person interviews much more than I like
Yeah.
virtual interviews. That's a lot more fun. But I feel like it's good for me to be well-rounded in terms of having to pivot. Like if a media company calls me up tomorrow and they're like, "Hey, we just want you for interviews," fine,
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
Give me the money. Um, but regardless, I felt that it was important for me to kind of learn that skill. I had never really done interviews prior to
Mm,
like doing wrestling stuff. I was always getting interviewed because I was like in newspapers for like my protests and stuff like
yeah.
that and doing communications there. So I was like, I really don't know what I'm doing. My first interview was actually in the documentary and it looked so bad. It was the Shane Taylor interview. I just grabbed a little clip of it. It was really not good. Um, but I mean, now I'm able to excel at doing 2 minute, 3 minute interviews. So I've kind of learned to kind of shift and adjust
Yeah.
my style of interviewing based on the person and just establishing genuine connections now. One of the things that I used to do when I did interviews was I would always open them up with 10, it was like a Shelly speed round or something like that. And we just do like
Hmm.
10 random questions. Like I'd ask them, what's your favorite flavor of cake or whatever, and just 10 random questions to get them comfortable. And now I feel like I don't have to do that anymore because I can just do it through
Yeah.
my formatting of questions. But I had those crutches that I used that I got to peel back now. But I enjoy my creative stuff a little bit more than I do the interviews. But the interviews are always a chance to see a wrestler on a new level and create a new
Hmm.
connection.
Yeah, which obviously you're doing this project. It's always fun for me because, and I think folks that watch our content will know. If you look at the roles we all play here, you're very much alongside me in that I feel very happy saying to you, Jaychele, if you want to host this, right? If you want to
Yeah.
do and I think it's fun because your point in this experience wise, that's very impressive to me. So I thought I would ask. Maybe my favorite part of the documentary is when you get a great degree of insight from Darius Lockhart on his character.
D lot, D lot.
And I love Darius, and like, everyone loves him, and he's my ultimate. Like, I wish the right guy would get him and the right platform, and I think there's something there special. But you got a real great answer on he's finding the character. My question is really simple: how was the experience of interviewing Darius Lockhart? Because he has an aura. That guy has something.
Oh my god. I literally okay, so I think at the beginning of the year, I made a list of a bunch of people that I wanted to interview. And obviously my list was not as ambitious as my list would be now.
Yeah.
Um, but it was full of people like Darius Lockhart, people who didn't often take interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Darius, I haven't seen him do another interview besides
Right.
mine. I don't even know he wasn't following me when I first asked him. I kind of just DM'd him and I was like, hoping and prayer, this is the perfect guy
Yeah.
for this. I would literally build Wrestling with Whiteness around Darius Lockhart if he gives me this interview. Um, so while I was talking to him, he was just giving me so much knowledge. Like even on the branding of Wrestling with Whiteness, he gave me like tips and
Wow.
ideas. Like we had a conversation about the name itself. We talked about the name Wrestling with Whiteness for 10 minutes off air. Like the interview itself was 40 minutes long. We talked for an hour and a half just about like experiences of being black in America. Like I came from a social justice background, so getting to talk to him about social justice issues was amazing. I sent him two of my books too. Um, and he was just always like so welcoming and such like a big brother to me. It was so amazing. And he was one of my first like Wrestling with Whiteness specific interviews because some of the pieces like the SCP interviews
Right.
and the Eli Isom interviews were just pieced together from other
Mhm.
interviews. That's why you don't see much of them. But Darius was one of the first ones, so I was working out the kinks with one of my prized guests, one of the people that I wanted the most. Um, and it was just amazing to get to talk to him. He was so honest about everything, and it was at a weird time for him too, because I interviewed him right at the beginning of February, so it was like a month after the whole Swole situation
Yeah.
happened, where he kind of just like, I'm not gonna finish my sentence.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was.
It was what it was.
Yeah, as a fan of Darius, it was. I sensed he would do what he believes right, and he certainly did that. And I always have admired his willingness to do that. Um, he's extraordinary.
He has so much strength, and even Suge talked about it, how
Yeah.
Darius kind of just carries so much weight on his back of like what black wrestling is and black culture and how many opportunities and bookings he's missed because of his values and his morals. It is insane. He is a much better person than I am because I am one to say I'll do anything for a check. As long as you don't have me walking out there looking like a coon, I'll do anything for a check. So
I have to say though, it's admirable from his perspective, but it is a terrible indictment of professional wrestling. It
yeah.
must be said because there are certain guys who wear their contrasting beliefs loudly, and they happily stay on TV for some time, don't they? And Darius, I think if you and I had our way, he'd be one of the top guys in the industry. But that's
I will
that's
make a promotion. Give me some money. Donate some money to me. I will make a promotion, and Darius Lockhart will be the top star.
I'm with look, honestly, you know look, there's a lot of great wrestlers out there right now. There is, and a lot of them are deserve better, and so, but he is different. The way that guy has a personality, as a promo, as a presence, what he represents, he's very, very unique. It's very special. So, yeah, I'm with you. Sticking with personalities and presence in wrestling, the portion of the documentary about the kind of authenticity of character and the way it's presented, it actually brought on a subject that I always find interesting in wrestling. Anyway, I wanted to get your take on it. So, Ricky, Swole, and Shane Taylor, especially, I vividly remember those three being like kind of just dismissing the notion of character to begin with, right? Like, it's just me. I've turned it up a little bit, to
Yeah.
different extremes for all three. What was your read on that, just as a wrestling topic? Like, some folks really like the idea of finding a character. And you have a guy like Ricky Starks, he kind of shot that, that term was like, it's not even a character to me. Was that fun to you to kind of pick the wrestlers', brains on that front?
Yeah. Of in the other interviews after Ricky, I was kind of just like trying to stop saying character even
Yeah.
because I felt like I was gonna offend them. Um, but to see them just be so, I guess, like I don't want to say honest because I've used that word so much, but just like transparent
Yeah.
about like how they were able to come up with this person that they have to display on TV. To put yourself out there. I've always kind of used characters as somebody or people who use characters as a way to kind of separate the
Right.
wrestling personality from the person themselves. Because you could separate the criticism and say, okay, well, um, they're criticizing Alexa Bliss, not Lexi Kaufman. Sorry to use
Right.
the Alexa Bliss reference with the most character person I could think
That's,
of.
that's a great example. Go ahead.
um, but the way that they're able to be so honest, fuck, I guess honest about
Yeah.
the way that they're portraying themselves and being just so vulnerable about who they are as a person. Obviously, you have to turn it up a notch or whatever, but that's still you at the end of the day. Swole's using moves and like statements that her mom uses and to have that be available for criticism, and like for Ricky to be just so quick on his feet, that's something that you can definitely tell comes from his
Yeah.
like personability that he has. So there's obviously the pros and cons of it, but it takes a lot of strength to be so transparent and in front of like millions of people.
Right. There's no shield there, right? It's like, oh, if they don't like me, they actually don't like me.
Hmm.
Like they basically are watching how I am.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Ricky, I thought was that part was very insightful when Ricky talked about kind of, and he even touched on like the people saying like, he's too feminine here, or he's too, and he was like, this is who I am,
Yeah.
and I mean, thank goodness he is that way. Ricky Stark, we all love Ricky Starks. He's
He's a
he's
star.
tremendous, but he really is, and I think I mean this. It's not the most important thing, but I will say I think this documentary is going to be a great success for you. I think it already is because you're proud of it, which is most important. I know that sounds lame, but let's be honest. We both create stuff. That does matter, right? That's what matters
Yes.
most.
Yeah.
But I do get the sense that Ricky may, as he continues to climb that wrestling ladder, I think it may add more and more kind of relevance and stature to what you've made here. Because I think we both agree Ricky's headed to the very very top. So
Oh yeah, and I've also had some conversations with people about this not being the only installment of the documentary that
yeah,
I do. There are some people who I wanted in this that aren't in this that I will eventually get to do a part of Wrestling with Whiteness. Like one person I want so bad is Leo Rush, and I pushed
mm-hmm.
so hard to get him, and it didn't end up happening. And Josiah Williams as well, um, didn't end up happening. Um, but those are two people on my list, along with Swerve and Keith Lee, that I need
Yeah,
to eventually talk to and get on there. And I'm hopeful it'll happen. I just got to give it the time. And
yeah,
Jade too. Oh
especially
my God.
Jade. Yeah, especially if this first installment goes as we hope it will. Right, I hope it'll be easier to kind of move forward in that regard. Okay, I thought JDX was a really strong addition here, and what he was, we're using the word honest a lot, but he really felt like he was giving you everything he possibly could.
Yeah.
Um, there was this one part that I thought was interesting where he talked about. You actually asked about the Terminus locker room initially, right? But he was talking about how when he's in a locker room that is predominantly black rather than the norm, he kind of feels comfortable and he'll use certain phrasing and lingo as the word he used. I was wondering, do you think that element of this could be a problem in terms of getting the talent's authenticity across? Because I said in the norm, a JDX, for example, isn't as comfortable and maybe isn't being himself. Do you think that makes it even more difficult for the powers that be to get his real personality on screen? Because that came to mind when I heard him say that. It's like, it makes sense, but I wonder if that is a factor at play here in terms of the kind of creative minds really knowing who this guy is. Maybe they're not comfortable enough to show them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a piece of it. When I talked with Alex Kane, he
Yes.
was kind of the most person who was the most open about their management in terms of how they communicate with them and how they're able
Yep.
to write storylines and whatever it may be, and promos and all of those things. And I feel like until we have people who look like us, they won't
Yep.
understand it. And I hate saying that over and over again, and it's stressed over and over again in the documentary. But that's just how it is. People who aren't black don't understand black culture in the way that black people do.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as other POC could try to understand it, each member, like Hispanic people, black people, and Asian people, and Native American people, all have their own separate
Yeah.
experiences as members of that ethnicity or race. So in order to kind of understand that, there has to be different, not departments, but different voices and different faces who
Yeah.
understand where those people are coming from. And honestly, when I did the interview with JDX, I did not know how it was going to go. At the beginning, he seemed incredibly shy,
Yeah.
and it seemed like he was not going to be incredibly open. And then we got into the end, and he was just like spilling it all. I was like,
Yes.
oh my God, where did this come from? But JDX was an amazing addition. I was very excited to have him. He's a great person. I've communicated with him a couple times offline as well. But
Really good talent too, by the way.
oh yeah, he has an
Really, really
amazing
good.
look too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I remember Alex talked about doing a pre-tape promo. There was a promo where, and then afterwards it was like, well, maybe we could tweak this, that, and next, and that
Yeah.
was really interesting. I want to
And
stick
that's in
with.
your favorite promotion, Joe.
Oh well, yeah, I'm well. You get what you get. JDX, I want to stay with him for a second because he said something that we've actually talked about on the Grin. We talked about way back when, before you was even part of our family here. Best word I can use for it. And we talked about when you was on too. He alludes to this idea that I personally totally believe and always have, that a black wrestler must have a character. And if they do not have a character, it is a talking point in a way that it never is with a white wrestler. I've said this about, I've given examples of this, that I truly believe this to be the case. This desperation for every black wrestler to have a gimmick. What's their character? And it's like, it always has to be some sort of loud,
Yeah.
like, simple question, but it's impossible to answer, I guess. Like, what is that? What is that subconscious? Because I think it's mostly subconscious. I don't think it's from people that are trying to be kind of, but you see it all the time, right? It's strange.
The way that I kind of always viewed it is like this need to put these black wrestlers in the box.
Yeah.
Sometimes they might come with just personalities that are out there and authentic. Like you look at Ali Moriarty, and he's just him. He doesn't need a
Yes.
character. Like he's automatically outgoing and he's captivating. But the difference is when you look at somebody who might just want to be themselves, they go, okay, well, we need to put you in this box because we know what works and you
Right.
don't. We're the company. We produce the stars. So you're going to take on this character that's worked before for other black people or has
Mm-hmm.
worked before, which really hasn't worked, and they just use it as a
Right.
stereotype sometimes. And you need to become this person, or you need to come with the character because the people who have personalities don't always align with our views. So, say you look at a Darius Lockhart, that's not a character, that's his
Yes.
personality.
Yeah.
And people might find that offensive and they go, oh, well, you can't do that. You need to have a character on screen, or you need to be something else.
Mm-hmm. It's like there's this desperation for it to be either like a cartoonish stereotype, as you said, or like it's bland. We can't do anything with this. And it's really strange. I've never understood it, but yeah, because again, maybe I'm giving people too much credit here, Jaychele, but I really do think for the most part, it's a subconscious thing people do. I don't. I
Oh, yeah.
just. It's puzzling. Okay, I want to circle back to Caprice Coleman, who again, great interview. He was very kind of self-aware at the end when he talked about his career and the key to commitment. Was it nice for you to have certain elements in this documentary that are kind of, that is advice in a way even beyond the scope of this hugely pivotal, document. That's just like Caprice was really being straightforward and sincere there, right? He was like, here's some things that happened to me. If you're gonna do it, go for it. Do you ever hope that those kind of pieces of advice will kind of extend this documentary's lifespan? Because I think it really might.
Yeah, the one I always was thinking when I was creating the documentary, I was like, there has to be something that's kind of accessible to more than just black people in terms of like
Right.
knowledge that they can take away with them. I mean, obviously, white folks can take learning away from this and take away their
Mm-hmm.
experiences, but some people focus their advice solely on black wrestlers, which is amazing, and then some people just focus their
Yeah.
advice solely on people in general, like Caprice did. Um, and I always thought that at the end, I wanted to leave I wanted to leave people with something tangible. Say you watch the whole documentary and you didn't know, like, okay, what do I do with this information now? Or like even the ways to change the community. Or so like I don't know, but like, okay, at least you'll remember this piece of this
Mm-hmm.
advice. So maybe if you want to come back to it eventually, you'll just rewatch it because you need to hear that advice again or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it did stand out to me, that element, because, as we said earlier, and good luck to him, Caprice had a very optimistic viewpoint. I think that's wonderful and we admire him greatly. But he was very direct there in terms of his own career and how things went and how things could be different. It was very interesting. Um, I do have to ask, I don't know it's a difficult question, but I'm just interested. Who is your favorite of the wrestler interviews? I'm intrigued. Just your favorite, when you were doing it that felt most in rhythm, that you was just really happy with how it was going.
Darius.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it goes Darius, and then it's a three-way tie at Willow, Swole, and Tasha, just all together.
Mm, yeah.
Um, and Shug D's though was a very wholesome experience, a very like teachable experience as well. Like he
Yes.
taught me so much stuff when he was talking,
He's very
and he just
thoughtful.
Yeah, he just carries so much knowledge everywhere he goes.
There was one particular portion, and I wish I could remember the exact, but it's deeper in the documentary, last third, I would say, where Suge really you ask a question and he just goes right, and
Oh
it's
my god, yeah.
incredible. What is that in the? I'm trying to remember what section that was.
I
Was it
think it's ways to
advice?
change.
Ways to change. There you go.
I feel
Yeah,
like it was, yeah, because I remember the way that I edited this series was we went through timestamps, and I just would take pieces from the timestamps, like of the individual interviews, and put them into
yeah,
separate sections, and I edited all the sections together. Um, but the the piece with Suge, I was like, this is a long boy, and I
yeah.
was thinking, I was like, am I gonna cut this? Yada yada yada. And I was like, no, put it all in
Right.
because it was all like incredible information. When I watched it back, like when I was listening to it, I was like, this all needs to be in it. I can't cut any piece of this out.
Yeah, I agree totally. And there's, from a viewer's perspective, I think the big message and sentiment that this thing had was it was very intent on helping folks understand. I think that word is really key to what this project is. It's such a wide range of different experiences and stories that really, as a viewer, especially a white viewer, you're just kind of what you said earlier. As much as you can as much as it can affect you or help you, there's a lot of insight here. And Shug's answer was a great example of that. Okay, as we kind of take this thing home, I do want to show some love to our content creator friends. Many of them are pals of ours. We've shared the screen with quite a few of those folks. Was that important to you to include some folks that kind of walk the same path you're walking now? Because I thought it was fun,
Yeah. Yeah, I asked a couple more people who were able to be a part of it and will hopefully be in the next piece. Um, and I felt really bad on some people that I didn't even ask, and it made me feel really bad
Yeah,
later.
yeah,
Um, but I was really happy with everybody who I got to include in there. I was so grateful that they were even willing to do it, because this project was so kind of last minute when I asked them.
right.
Most of them had maybe a week or two to kind of just send over a video. I didn't give them much guidelines of what to say, and that's why everybody kind of has
Mm-hmm.
different things that they say. But I thought that it was important to just, give people a platform to say whatever they felt needed
Yeah,
to be said in addition to the documentary. Um, but I thought that it was super important for me to put Victor in it. I know that when I was having conversations with him beforehand, he was like, "I'm not a content creator. Why do
right.
you want me to send a video?" Like
Yeah.
I was like, "Dude, you make so much content. Like you like the wrestling club that he hosts.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always see it on my timeline, and it's so
Yeah.
wholesome. And he's always uplifting the black community through his wrestling club. So I was like, Andrew just had Sasha there. It was like the day after Sasha was at his school. I was like, no, you need to do this, and you need to talk about how it's affected your kids as well and your life and everything like that. And it was important for me to have that as well because a lot of those people are my friends too offline, and I know their experiences personally, so I wanted to give them a platform too.
How do you feel about, from your perspective, how do you think wrestling media is doing in that regard? And I think you know me well enough to know I'm not asking that on anyone's behalf because I want your honest answer. I have no attachments here, but I wonder, how do you personally feel like where we're at here in mid 2022?
There's progress.
Yeah.
It's slow, but there's progress. Um, I wish that beyond um certain individual slots for shows or whatever it may be,
Mm-hmm.
that there was more opportunity across the board. And when I say opportunity, I mean paid opportunity
Yeah.
because that's so hard to come by in this landscape of media and stuff like that,
Right.
that a lot of black voices end up going after the same opportunities or are forced to do writing when what they're interested in is podcasting. But
Mm-hmm.
you got to do what it takes to make the money, like I said before.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I was, the boat that I was in. I had to write. I'm not a writer. That's not the position I want to end up in. You want to hear my voice. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
a much better podcaster than I am a writer. I can get the job done when it comes to writing, but that's not my preferred way to go
Mm-hmm.
about things. But I feel like as the community grows, there are certain people who are viewed as the head of like the black wrestling media
Right.
community. And they have, I guess, more say over what opportunities get put into what people's hands or if the opportunity goes to them directly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like mainstream, the Black wrestling media community holds a lot of talent. Like you look
Yeah.
at like a Complex Unsanctioned. Oh, oh my God! Hold on, sorry, 1 second.
Okay, good.
Oh Jesus Christ!
Oh, I'm used to feeling dead air. I do shows with Bob.
Oh my God! Um, oh my God! But I feel like Complex Unsanctioned is a really huge platform to
Yeah.
like one be part of Complex, two to utilize like Spotify, and three the guests that they have on are insane, and that's a huge opportunity that I feel like there should be more opportunities like that out there for other Black wrestling media faces and personalities.
Yeah, I had to ask because I think we're both wearing that your segment shows that there's so much talent, right? And I think that was important. Well, I guess to conclude this, that the natural question to ask is, I kind of spoke on your behalf earlier, because I'm pretty confident in your answer. But are you happy with this? Well, I think you should be, but are you happy with it deep down?
Yeah, I'm extremely happy with this.
Good.
I have a lot of anxiety over the project and the reception and
Yeah.
everything like that, but that's also kind of why I haven't been promoting it. I like I don't know how I dug myself into this hole, but we are now like 4 days out from it releasing, and I've promoted it like 2 or 3 times, and I'm just like so anxious about it. I'm just like, okay, you know what? What I'm gonna do is we're just gonna focus on like the post-release promotion and just make
Yeah.
that stronger than like the pre-release, which I prefer anyway, because people don't always like check the bell or whatever, click the bell, whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be. But I'm excited to see how people take the project. I'm excited to see what I can do next. I'm already starting to line up some people for the next edition as well, which is really exciting. And I hope that we can get more people involved, and I can kind of circle back to some of the wrestlers who I didn't get a chance to
Right.
talk to before, and obviously content creators as well. And maybe I'll be able to expand it to people who are also like managers and things like that. Like I talked with Ron, but Ron's also a wrestler as well, so I kind of want to get the
Mm.
perspective of like even some promoters too, like
Yeah.
Black Pro Wrestling Company promoters as well. Like I've spoken with Spice Miguel before, who does the Black Girl Magic show. And they also are doing a second edition of that, I think in August, I want to say.
Right.
But yeah, I'm excited regardless to see where I go with this. My favorite piece of this, which I did not expect it to be, was choosing the music. I didn't think I
Yeah.
was gonna like it that much, but when I got to choose the music, I was very excited. And classical music is not my jam at all. I don't listen to that.
It fits there though,
It
right?
just
For what?
felt so right.
Yeah. Immediately, like I said it to you when you said it, I was like, "Oh, this is going to be great." It
Yeah.
give me very high hopes right away. I'm very confident this is going to be a major success for you. But I do want to stress, and I know it's like the most lame, like parent thing I could say here, but seriously, it's a success, right? Like, seriously, you put together a 2 hour plus documentary featuring some of the top professional wrestlers in the world. Like, be proud of that, and let's celebrate when this thing blows up and goes crazy, right? So that's the best way to approach this. Jaychele, congratulations on producing Wrestling with Whiteness. Please promote it. I mean, we've done that here, but like, give the formal promotion before we take this thing home. Go ahead.
Yes, be sure to check out Wrestling with Whiteness on my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Hopefully, you've already watched it and you're coming to
Yeah.
watch this as a behind the scenes, pull back the curtain edition of the documentary. But I hope you enjoy it. Please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments of the video or just DM them to me personally if you have a longer form edition of thoughts. I'm looking for all feedback in terms of editing, the way that
Mm-hmm.
it's pieced together, the way the interviews are working. I love feedback and it's how I can grow. So please,
Yeah.
give me constructive criticism. Don't just be a hater. If you're going to be a hater, then don't watch it anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but I really hope that you guys enjoy it. I put a lot of time into it. And the wrestlers who were a part of it, I cannot thank them enough for their dedication to being a part of this project. I'm literally a 17-year-old, so they could have just told me no. I don't know what you're doing. But I appreciate them being so willing to
Yeah.
kind of help me explore this piece of social justice in the wrestling industry, as that is my background. That's literally what I'm going to college for. So
Right. Absolutely. I know, I say it to you often. This is merely the starting point for you. This will be like chapter two of your eventual book about this. You're taking over this space. But I know I can speak for everyone on the Grin team. We're all very very proud of what you've done so far, but many many successes ahead. Okay, folks, you heard Jaychele. If you haven't seen the documentary already, why did you watch a 55-minute interview about it? I don't know, but if you haven't, go support it. I'm going to put the link in the description. Gimmick, folks. We appreciate all your support on all of the stuff we do. And we seriously implore you to watch Jaychele's wonderful documentary. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. Oh, wow.